With your indulgence, one last video, one last thing to look at. I'm going to be asking you to work with a different file this time when you do your Fama French homework. FF stands for Fama French, and this is the actual file. This file is published every day by Kenneth French. It contains values that indicate an analysis of the New York Stock Exchange on each day since 1926 and going on through the present day. I think what we have in this file is everything almost up to the present day, everything up since April of 2018 when I last updated this file. But what I'd like to talk about today is, or in this video, is how we're going to be able to work with a file like this. The added wrinkle in working with this file this time around is the fact that the file contains lines that we don't want in our analysis. A lot of files are going to work this way. For example, CSV files almost always have at least one header line. But a file like this also has additional lines that we don't want. For example, comments. This comment at the top, obviously, we're not interested in. This header, we're not interested in. We might be interested in it for the extra credit homework this week, but we do know that we don't want to be adding these values up when we do our analysis. At the bottom, too, there's a footer, 3 lines of a footer that don't indicate the data or don't include the data. So how are we going to work with a file like this? Now you might want to conceptualize this yourself before we begin. I'm going to show you a very easy way to do it and a way that I feel underscores how we can sometimes work with files. So if you want, pause and just think conceptually, how am I going to get the values out of this file and not work with any of the lines that don't contain data. Okay, let's go over my answer to this question. Now, when I ask this of students, most students will say, I'll loop through the file and I will look at the line and see if it's what I'm looking for. And truth be told, that would be an effective approach for this particular file. For example, we all know that we can slice each line, right? You can slice the line, and if you were to slice the first 8 characters and check to see if the first 8 characters were is-digit, right? If they were all digits, then we would know that this is a data line. And looking at the file, especially looking at the top and the bottom, we can see that that would probably work. However, I'm going to ask you to use a different approach. I would like you to slice out the lines that you want. Now, one assumption that you can make about this file is that the first 5 lines are going to be non-data lines, and the last 3 lines are going to be non-data lines. So what I'm going to ask you to do is work with this file with that understanding and slice out the data lines. Question is, how are you going to do that? How do you slice lines from a file? That's really the purpose of this video. The answer is, consider that the file can be expressed as a list of lines. And you know you can slice a list. So if you think of this file as a list in which that's the first item, that's the second item, that's the third item, that's the fourth item, that's the fifth item, and that's the 6th item, and if you consider that the last 3 lines are also wanting to be excluded, that is everything up to but not including everything up to but not including the last 3 lines, you should be able to devise a slice that will do that. I'm just going to show you not the particular answer, but I'm going to show you how we can manipulate files so easily using this slicing method. Let's take a quick look. If I quickly open up my FF Research Factors Daily, and if I begin by, let's say, just confirming that I can run this, make this just a little bit bigger. Okay, I see that I made a mistake probably in the spelling, although that really does look correct. FF Research Data Factors Daily. Yeah, missed a piece. There we go. Good. You see why testing's so important? I know you'd run it eventually. Okay, so we are printing the file handle. We get this real weird object. This is not an error. You know, an error always begins with traceback. So fine. What we'll do now is work with the file as if it were a list. How do we make a file into a list where each item is a line? Do you remember? It's one of the 3 approaches that we take to working with data with a file. We can simply say read lines. Now, reading a file this way with read lines means that, and if I print lines, it's going to be an unearthly jumble. In fact, it takes a while even to print it out on PyCharm. But what we're seeing is a list of lines, and we can know that, and we can marshal very large data sets like that by simply printing the first line. There's the first line of the file. Now we can compare what we're seeing here to what we're seeing here. Sure enough, there is the first line. This file was created by CMPT, etc. And there it is, output this way. So that's the first line of the file. Now this gives us a great deal of power in how we want to manipulate this file. For example, maybe we're just interested in knowing how many lines. Now you did this before, but I just want to emphasize how important this is. 24,000, or how powerful rather. All right, so we know how we could get the first line, we could get the last line. How could I get the last line of the file? Just lines -1. There's the very last line. Copyright 2018, Kenneth R. French. That's the line. Excellent. Okay, what if I wanted to see the first 5 lines? Let's do that. I could call it header lines equals lines 0 to 5. That's going to get me the first 5 lines. And there they are. Now they don't print out very nicely, so we might want to loop through them perhaps. You see, with all the tools that we've been given, it's possible to begin thinking in interesting ways. Now this output isn't very satisfying either, mostly because my font size is a little big. But you can see it's printing the first line there, it's printing the second line, the third line, the fourth line, the fifth line. It looks like the header line's the 5th line. You may be asking why blank lines in between. You'll want to remember that if we wanted to get rid of them, we could strip them. And now we're seeing the first 5 lines. They're wrapping. That's not too satisfying. But there is this file, the T-bill, in the month, blank line, and then market ref. You can always go back to the file and see that that's what the file shows. And if we wanted to get, let's say, just the, well, I mean, this is it. It's a list. You can manipulate it any way you want. You can loop through it. You can get the length of it. You can get a slice of it. You can get the first or the last line. The way I'd like you to solve the problem of working just with the lines that you want is by using a slice. I need you to calculate the slice, and then I need you to test the slice. Let's say that I just wanted to get the first 2 lines of this file. Or maybe let's say I'm just going to arbitrarily say, I just want the 08 and the 09. So I'm going to count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want the 8th item, and I want the next 2 items. So I'm going to say 10 here because this will give me index 8, index 9, and not index 10. That is the 9th, 10th, and 11th line. Now, how can we find out what's in this slice? If it's a very big slice, then it might not be that easy. What we could do is assign to a slice and then just print the first item of the slice. In doing that, we can see the first item in the slice. We can also print the last item in the slice. And it looks like we got what we wanted. If we were going to work with a much larger file, however, for instance, maybe we wanted everything from 1926. Well, we could use the slicing that we talked about, and we probably should for different years. But if we wanted to get a large slice like this, and we go all the way down to the bottom, we see that the 155th item is the last item in 1926, and the first one is, let's say, item 6, maybe we can use that slice. 6 and 156. Now, I'm only doing this to prove a point. The fact is, when you make a large slice like this, and if I'm looking for the 1926 slice, let's say, I need to verify that I got the right thing. And when you're working with a very large data set, that can be problematic. So how can I check to see that I got what I wanted? I certainly can't just print slice 1926 because that's going to be a giant jumble. It's going to be kind of hard to see. So how can I manage a large slice like this? Because you're going to too. I can simply print the first item in slice 1926, and I can also print the last item in slice 1926. And in so doing, I'm basically examining that list to see what's in it. And it looks like I may have made a mistake. I really want the first item to be the first day in 1926, which is supposed to be 0701. That was the first day they started keeping records in 1926. So it looks like I have to adjust my slice. What's more, it looks like I went too far with this item. Let's look back at the file. Well, let's just play with it, actually. Maybe I should just play with the number until I can see that the first item and the last item are what I wanted. And in fact, that looks correct. The first item in 1926 was on the 6th item in the file, that is the 5 index. And the last item, the last line in the file that contained 1926, turned out to be the 156th item, that is index 155. So I'm only showing this to you because I'm going to ask you to slice the file before you start working with it, and you're going to need to calculate which is the first and last line of the file. However, I do want you to understand that in a large file like this, you may be tempted to get the whole length and then use the length number to determine the last item. But what I'm going to suggest you do is use the negative index, because this line is the -1 line, and this line is the -2 line, and this line is the -3 line. You should be able to use a negative slice on the second index, a negative index on the second index in the slice, in order to indicate which is the last item. For instance, it might be something like that. You'll have to experiment with it a little bit and then test it the way I'm showing you here. But I hope you will do that, because we'd like to get an accurate slice, and your testing program will also insist upon that.